Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jim Kleiber Show. I am Jim Kleiber. Today is Monday, September 21st, 2020, 1 p.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. I am coming to you live on YouTube and for the first time on Facebook and Twitter or Periscope as well. So I have absolutely no idea how this is going to go, but why not? Because part of the idea of this is to start experimenting in public and to just be more relaxed, being vulnerable, if that makes sense. We had a weekend. We had a weekend, and sometimes in the pandemic, it's easy to forget that we had a weekend. And a few things happened this weekend. The only one that's coming to my mind is that there was in the news something called the FinCEN files. So FinCEN stands for the Financial Crimes and Enforcement Network, I believe. It's a part of the Department of Treasury in the U.S. Federal government. And there were many, many files that were leaked out from that organization to a handful of journalists. And journalists, I think they said it was like 100 different newsrooms, 400 journalists across 88 countries that have been working to put these stories together. And so the files that leaked were called SARS, or Suspicious Activity Reports, that banks file to the Department of Treasury, to FinCEN, when they come across transactions that seem suspicious, especially larger transactions that may relate to money laundering or other unknown money origins. So many of these were leaked, I think 2,100 or so. And it said that the number of words in the leaks together were something like 3 million, which is, they showed a comparison of different books. They said it was like War and Peace plus many other very thick books, like 15 of them or so, that would equal 3 million. So they spent a lot of time, these journalists spent a lot of time reading through these SARS and things like this. And I was very excited to read them because there's a part of me that has been very curious about what's happening behind the scenes in terms of organized crime, in terms of banking, in terms of money laundering, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's going to be more and more that comes out. It seems, I guess the way to sum it up for me, it seemed like the SARS, there were too many of them that were being reported for FinCEN to keep up. One part of the article said that they, something like 2 million were reported over the last 5 or 6 years, or something, even maybe even more than that. It was crazy. And that many times people in FinCEN didn't even have time to read the suspicious activity reports, let alone act on them and do enforcement of the law with regards to them. So, there's a part of me that jumps in and says, oh, okay, how do we fix this? How do we stop organizations from, whether they're intentionally just trying to comply with the law or also trying to flood FinCEN with too many documents that it's too hard for them to keep up? And that's one of the first thoughts I had. I was like, oh, it just sounds like what they're doing with the internet and disinformation is that, oh, it's much easier to flood somebody with lots of information and overwhelm them than to, and if we do that, then they can't keep up. I mean, a lot of the fake news and disinformation we see on the internet seems to be that way. I remember reading about disinformation back in 2016, like the week after Trump got elected. And I believe might have been Ethan Zuckerman or somebody else on the internet that was talking about one of the goals of disinformation is to flood the internet, flood the media with fake stories and semi-fake stories and true and partially true stories, so that there's too much information. It just becomes too hard to know what's true and what's not true. Just to overwhelm, basically, overwhelm the mind and throw us into a tizzy. And I don't know if that was the intention with a lot of these suspicious activity reports, these SARS, but I believe it was the outcome that there were too many reports and the people in the enforcement agency couldn't even read them all, let alone enforce. And, I think about that and how there's a certain law, and then people, if they have enough time, they have enough money and enough creativity and risk taking, that they can skirt around the laws. Sometimes illegally, but sometimes legally, and there's no problem. And I think about that as how it relates to what's happening in the Senate, because the other thing that happened over the weekend, it was Friday, was that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice, passed away, I believe at age 87. She had been struggling through cancer. And, I had a conversation with some people, and they were talking about how she just passed. Why we need to pause? Why are we focused so much on politics right now and whether she's going to get replaced or not? Why can't we just pause for one day and be grateful for her life and mourn the loss of her life? Can't we just pause? And then, of course, I rebutted and say, oh, yes, I mean, we should pause, but at the same time, like, this is a big news, people are in shock, and I think that the pause actually happens at the funeral, at the ceremony, the memorial, where we pause, we slow down, and we celebrate the life. But it speaks to something that I really want to talk about today, which is the idea of the unwritten laws we have in life, the cultural rules and norms that we abide by that aren't written down, that don't have strict formal punishments, that a lot of times are very tacit knowledge, and we're not even aware of these norms. And I think for some people, I mean, for example, that there's a norm that if somebody dies, you wait 24 hours. You focus on and celebrate the life of that person before you talk about the implications of it. But not everyone shares that norm, that ethical rule, that unwritten law isn't shared by everyone. And especially nowadays, as we have more cultures that are mixing, not only generations, but parts from different parts of the world coming together, and also people on the internet, where it's this weird, there's internet culture, but it's also smashing together of all of our home geographic cultures. And there's a lot going on in terms of cultural mixing these days. And I think we can assume that people will follow these unwritten laws, but the other person may not even know the unwritten law. So perhaps people, don't know or don't believe that one should pause for 24 hours to reflect on the death of somebody before considering the implications of the death, especially somebody like a public figure. But for some people, that's a very deep rule that one should follow. And then I think about I think about the conversation about her and being replaced at the Supreme Court. And one of the things that people in the U.S. started talking about was in 2016, I believe it was February, one of the Supreme Court judges passed away. I believe it was Antonin Scalia, if I'm saying his name correctly. And Obama wanted to nominate Merrick Garland to be the replacement. And Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate said, no, this is not going to happen because we're in election year. The election is coming up at the end of the year, and we believe that the person who is elected next should choose the Supreme Court justice. And Democrats were in an outrage. Like, this is ridiculous. It's like 270 days or 250 days until the election. This is not how it should work. But there was no law that said that it should work this way or that way. There was no written formal law that said it. But there was this kind of code, this unwritten code of this is what you do. This is the precedent. This is how people have acted in the past, and this is how one should do it. You should let the person nominate somebody so far away from the election. Well, Republicans didn't do that, and there was a lot of anger in the Democratic side. Now, fast forward to, I think it was even 2016 or 2018, where Lindsey Graham himself, a Republican who was pushing for to wait until the election to see who was elected to make the choice for Supreme Court justice, said, if there is a Republican in office, this was in 2016, if there's a Republican in office in 2016 going forward, and in the last year of their term, a Supreme Court justice needs to be nominated, we will wait to the next election for the next president. And I think he even said, you can use my words against me. And of course, fast forward to 2020, and Ginsburg passes away, and Lindsey Graham is saying the opposite. He's saying, oh no, the president was elected specifically for this purpose, is to, this is the reason he was elected, was to get the Supreme Court justices, and therefore it makes sense. Even though the election is something like less than 50 days away, maybe 44 days away, which is what, compared to 250 or 270 days, is quite close. Some people are already voting. And so there's this element of, we want people to follow the rules. We want people to follow the law and enforce the law. But so much of society is not based on written formal law. It's based on informal agreements we make with each other, informal precedents, and norms and codes of honor that we've embedded in ourselves and in our society. And just fixing the law and just fixing the external structures of society won't fix a lot of these internal challenges. So, if I think about, I've had a strong focus on going to politics in the last couple of years. I haven't told too many people about this because I was kind of dancing with it. But I've really thought about going into politics, running for elected office. And I think in that idea, it was that if I could help change the external environment, if I could help change the laws, if I could help change the shape and structure of the institutions and the structure of society, then everything would be okay. I could help so many people, relieve so much pain, bring so much unity and togetherness just by tweaking the infrastructure. Not yes, the roads and things like that, but kind of the societal infrastructure, and I think just over this last weekend, I've been thinking more and more, it's that if we don't just fixing the external infrastructure is not going to help. It may help, but it won't be sufficient. Because, put it this way, it's like playing a sport. Let's say soccer, because it's an example relevant to many people around the world. If we're playing soccer and somebody is following all the rules, but it's kind of bending the rules and cheating a little bit, then then we need to put a new rule into place because they're cheating and they're bending the rules, and we don't think they should be allowed to do that. And so we put the new rule into place, but then they just go around that rule again. They just skirt the rule. So if the people aren't willing to follow the rules and they're constantly looking for ways to get around the rules and cheat the rules and bend the rules so that they can win, and ignore kind of sportsmanship and decorum and things like this, then in a way, it doesn't matter how many rules we put in place. We can't put in enough formal rules to control everything about society. And if we do, what kind of society is that? I don't want to live in a society where everything is formally structured and we have to abide by every single rule. I want to live in a place where people look out for each other and care for each other and aren't trying to use the rules to screw each other over. Oh my gosh, how nice of a place would that be? And I started thinking about it. I'm like, why? Why are people trying to say, in the past I said this, but now, oh no, the situation's totally different now because I'm in charge. In the past I wasn't in charge, but now I'm in charge. So I'm going to do the exact opposite because the rule doesn't matter. What matters is that I win, and I'm going to try to bend and break the rules as far as I possibly can. Actually, bend them as far as I possibly can, just so that they don't break, but I still win. What? I don't like playing games with people like that. I don't want to play a basketball game against somebody like that, where they're stretching the definition of traveling, or they're stretching the definition of taking a charge or a block or things like this, or goaltending, or they're stretching all the rules when it's in their favor, and then they're strictly enforcing them when it's not. It's just, how much of society depends on the strict rules that we have, and how much of it depends on the informal interactions and informal relationships that we have, and how much of it depends on the relationship we have to ourselves. I was reading somewhere the other day, and that's a common phrase these days. I was reading something somewhere on the internet by someone the other day, but I was reading about this idea that we project onto other people the behaviors that we do. So, for example, if I'm likely to try to rob and steal and cheat somebody, I assume the rest of the world is doing the same. If I'm a person who knows that I lie about this and about that, then I assume everyone else is lying. It's this kind of assumption that people behave like me, people think like me, people believe the same things I do, people feel like I do. People are just like me. It's just assuming the world is like me. I don't think I'm the only one who does this. I know I do this a lot. And it shocks me sometimes when I realize, wait, you don't know how to do that? I was just talking with my mom about this the other day. For me, certain things on grammar, for example, are super obvious. And they're obvious because I've studied them and worked in them for a while. There's a difference between a regular dash and an N dash, which is a medium size, and then an M dash, which is the large one. And they're used in different contexts in writing. And I said, it baffles me that people don't know this. But then again, of course people don't know this. We all know kind of a certain slice of the world. We don't all know the same stuff. And I just thought how funny it was that we do this all the time. I think we do. I mean, I do this all the time. See, even me doing it right now is assuming that you do it as well. But maybe you don't. Maybe you don't do this at all. It's just me assuming that the other people do the same thing that I do all the time. So I do this a lot. I do it a lot where I assume other people are understanding and doing the same things I am. And if I'm lying to a lot of people and I'm hiding a lot of things from people, I'm assuming other people are lying and hiding a lot of things from people. But maybe they're not. Maybe it's just my assumption. And so if I'm out there thinking that the world's going to come and try to steal things from me and take things away from me, maybe it has more to do with my own fear than it does with their actual actions. Maybe it has to do with my actions and what I think the world is like. And so I talk about this in a somewhat jumbled way, but to me it seems jumbled, so I'm assuming that for you it seems jumbled, but maybe for you it seems very clear. How often do we do this? Goodness. AKA, how often do I do this? See, I'm trying to catch myself. But I think even if we were to come up with the perfect style of government, the perfect constitution, the perfect laws, the perfect institutions on paper, they still rely on human beings interacting with each other. And if we think that the other people are out to get us, we think that the other people are trying to destroy our lives. We think that the other people don't even know that we exist. We think that the other people will do whatever it takes to win. We think that the other people want us to lose. Then yeah, it makes sense to bend the rules, to cheat, to try to get every single advantage we could. Because if people don't care about us, if we believe people don't care about us, well, why should we care about them? If we believe people will never care about us, then why should we care about them at all? If we think they're going to cheat us, we should cheat them first. If we think that they're going to screw us, we should screw them first. But just because we believe that they're going to do these things doesn't mean they'll actually do it. And the irony is that when we believe these things, it's likely that they will do it because it hurts when somebody believes that we'll do these things. I mean, I've experienced this in relationships or romantic relationships where the girl thought that I would cheat on her. And I never did cheat on her, but the assumption that I would cheat on her. And it hurts to think that someone that you're so close to, someone that you've been trying so hard to be so loyal and exclusive with, thinks that you're cheating on them. It's like, do you understand how many sacrifices I've made? Like, I haven't. Do you understand? And it just hurts over and over. And it's like, oh, you're probably going off and you're talking to these other girls. You're probably doing this. You're probably doing this. Like, really? At some point you get like, if this person is never going to trust me, maybe I should do it anyways. It's just, and then the other person, oh, see, I knew you would do it. It's like, no, you distrusted me so long. You hurt me so long that maybe I thought I should do it. Because how could I convince you I wasn't doing it? You'd seem to not believe a single word that I said anyways. And so this idea of focusing on the law and focusing on the politics and focusing on the kind of the formal structures of society may not be sufficient, because at the end of the day, if we don't trust each other, if we don't trust ourselves, if we don't think people care about us and we don't care about each other, we don't care about them, then the rules don't matter that much. Oh, look I got a comment. Hey. Oh, yeah, look at that comment. Hey, thank you, game quitters. So the rules don't matter that much if we're so focused on how much other people are going to try to use the rules to cheat us and screw us over. If we don't think people care about us, if we don't think people love us, if we don't think people are being honest with us, then I don't think the rules matter that much. Now, I mean, we could put rules in place that could try to encourage people to be more honest, try to encourage people to show more love and show more care. But even then, it may not work. I mean, there's certain things like, for example, a lot of us aren't very honest when we're talking in public, because now we're trying to balance many different opinions at the same time and we don't want to say the wrong thing. But when we're private, when we're much more private, we can be much more honest, especially when we know that the conversation is confidential. And so this is one reason that I believe in talking about rules. One thing we could really do to change the US Congress is to give them more confidentiality in their voting process. Because when they have to vote so openly and they have to discuss and deliberate so openly, maybe it's not even about the voting process, but the deliberation process. When they have to do that so openly, they can have a tendency to try to please every single person and give in to peer pressure. But if they're a little more private, they could have perhaps a little more courage to be honest. But even then, even then, I mean, this is just assuming, because it could bump it a little bit. But if they go into privacy and they still think people are trying to screw them over, then they may not change their behavior whatsoever. They may try to hide it in other ways. It may help a little bit, but then in public, they just attack each other. So I'm not saying that changing the formal rules can't help, but I wonder if it's the most kind of effective way to go about it. Something that one of my bosses used to say to me in the consulting firm I used to work in a couple of years back. He said, we always have contracts with the client, but the contract you sign in the beginning, and if you start working with a client and the client starts to look back at the contract, you're in trouble, because it's at that point that you've lost trust with the client, because they're starting to look back and say, oh, wait, what did he say he would do? Oh, it's not going that well. Like, what were the specific rules and laws we set down for this relationship? And I took a lot away from that. It's this idea that we don't really need the contract so much when we have that trust between each other, when we can rely on each other to follow these unwritten rules, and when we don't follow the unwritten rules, to talk about it and to reconcile our relationships, to resolve the conflict. And I think for me, over the last couple of years, I've been caught up in the idea of how do I fix or help fix these laws that we have in society that are really hurting people. But when I slow down and let myself really listen to myself, I care more about the informal, the tacit knowledge, the tacit relationships we have with each other more than I do the explicit ones. And yeah, I feel a little more free when I think about working on helping me be grateful for the people in my life and see the good in others and see the good in myself. Yeah, we have good and bad. It's all good and bad, but it just depends what we want to look at, I can focus on the bad all the time if I want to, but it can make me feel really miserable. And then I can assume that other people are miserable and that other people are trying to hurt me and this and that. But I don't know, I could focus on this in a way that could bring some deeper resolution to each other, some kind of a more grounded healing instead of focusing on just the external factors. Maybe this helps you, maybe it doesn't. Sometimes I'm just speaking into the void of the computer, and like I said, grateful that my friend joined in and said hi. But maybe we think that the world outside of us, if we change our environment, we're going to change ourselves. And that happens sometimes, but we can also change change ourselves and therefore change the environment. So it can go outside in, but it can also go from the inside out. And, it's, in a way, it's a lot simpler to change from the inside out. It would be very difficult for me to get into a position of politics and to try to change all these different laws that we have and lots of conversations. It's much easier for me or much simpler for me to pay attention to myself. I'm with myself all the time. So if I start paying attention to and trying to resolve the conflicts in my life, with the people in my life, but also with myself, then perhaps the external conflicts will start to resolve themselves. Who knows? But I thought it was a worthy topic to explore this morning, this afternoon, whatever it is. I tell you, these pandemics, man, this pandemic has got me spinning around in circles. It's almost fall. It's almost October. Oh my goodness. It's almost Halloween. What am I going to do for Halloween? Should I keep the beard until Halloween so that I could do some Halloween costume with a beard? Oh man, I wanted to get rid of this beard, but that sounds tempting. When am I gonna have a beard like this ever again? I don't know. I mean, look at this thing. It's quite monstrous. Could I dye it? Could I trim it? What could I do? I don't know. I braided it the other day. That was fascinating. Okay, I'm going to stop speaking to the void, and hope you all have a good Monday and you had a great weekend. And just take some time to not pay so much attention to the external world and a little more to the internal world. Hasta luego. See you later.